You can start now, we are live.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the 7th Design Hat Talk. Today we have with us Kranti Vanjari, who has over 6 plus years of experience in user research. Currently, she is the design lead at WNS Global Creations. Design thinking is an important part of solving problems. But how exactly? That's exactly what are we going to discover today. How has design thinking contributed in solving user problems? Over to you, Kranti.
Thank you, Siddhi, and thank you, Design Hat team, for welcoming, for inviting me for this forum. I'm really glad that students like you are taking this initiative to invite people like me, and wherein people like us can share knowledge and probably discuss about design more. So I will start sharing my screen so that we can begin with the presentation part. Okay, just let me know if my screen is visible. Okay, so this is what I am. So as Siddhi mentioned that yes, I have got a 6+ years of experience in design research, and also did a bit of design strategy to some extent. Also did UX design, UX strategy, and then visual experience strategy. And now I'm currently UX lead at WNS Global Services with their digital transformation business unit. Probably trying my hands on poetry, also mentoring design students, learning empathy, a very strong design thinking evangelist. And I guess I'm still learning a lot because I'm still pursuing design thinking course from Stanford University. It's a online kind of an 3 months course wherein you get to work with a lot of international students and perform an innovation project. So that's about me now. For this, whatever 6 7 or maybe it's like almost now 8 years being into design industry, I have realized that designers have a method to solve a lot of problems, because when it comes to designing products for users, there's a lot of empathy practiced by designers, which basically leads them to solutions which are far more better, far more sustainable, far more desirable, feasible, and viable. And that's where basically the whole design thinking all started. So I'm not going to really talk a lot about how it started and who started it, and why did it started and so on. But instead, I'm just going to take you through certain stories where design thinking was utilized and there was some sort of problem solving which was done. So let's have a look at these kind of some industry successful stories of coming from different type of business domains, and how design thinking has really helped solving major global problems. So what is it really? So there's a fundamentally very humorous kind of an blog that I came across, and there was an interesting illustration that designer had put across, that there's no magic happening that a designer would just jump to a problem. There is a process to it. There's a lot more bridge to it, which kind of joins the problem statement to the solution oriented thinking, and that process is what a designer uses. But now that process is open to the world, which means that many people in businesses, probably in governmental organizations and services, are trying to use design thinking as a tool to solve their industry related problems, and they are basically getting a lot of good ROI, which is return on investment, which is helping them to make their solutions much better, more affordable, viable, desirable, feasible. Now, I will keep using these words like viable, desirable, and feasible, because that's what design thinking is. But let's start with something very fresh and something more young, a more youthful brand like Airbnb. So I'll talk about going back in 2009 when Airbnb was a startup. That time, of course, the whole website and the mobile application was not as clean as what you see on my screen. But Airbnb was like newly started in New York, and they had some 40 odd listings of properties. And Joe Gebbia and Paul Graham, who are the founder of Airbnb, happened to be themselves a kind of a design background. And they were trying to look at certain issues within the organization. So, I mean, within the organization as in a business kind of an issue. What they were realizing that there were some 40 odd listings in New York which was not really working, which means that people were not renting out those places for some reason. So they kind of deep dive. They did a lot of brainstorming, and they got their team and they huddled together, and they just put up those pictures what they had posted on their website of those properties. What they realized that the pictures which were put up of those properties were pixelated, were not really taken from good angle. Basically, the whole balance and the whole composition of those pictures was not really good. And they were not looking very aspirational for someone to, like, spend some few dollars to rent out that property for few days or for a month. So they realized that, and they felt, okay, let's try and change these pictures to some better quality pictures. So they themselves traveled to New York and went to those 40 listed properties, clicked fantastic pictures, and posted on the website. What they realized was, I mean, previously they were earning like $200 per week, and suddenly there was a boom of $400 a week. So that was quite a leap in their earnings. And then they realized, okay, if you just change a bit of experiential factors on their website, they are able to make some good amount of profit. So that was like a baby step for them to realize something, that something which may not be very scalable could still work for them, and how they can start improvising their service by attacking these smaller problems. So what they did was they actually came up with a complete cultural shift. So Airbnb was hiring a lot of new people, and what they used to do is, whenever you hire new people, they are asked to become like pirates. So pirates, as in, you go on a trip, you basically navigate the sea, and you look for stories, and you come back with the stories, and then you narrate those stories to the team, talk about the problems, and then basically ideate for the solutions. So what they really did was, these new joinees, they used to take a trip to all these different places in US, probably in Alaska or California or Chicago, Texas, and then they used to meet their probably prospective customers and so on, and understand their stories, understand the pain points while they have to avail the services of Airbnb. They used to capture those stories in form of pictures, videos, then come back to their office and then ideate with a humble team and then try to look out for solutions. Where sooner or later they kind of realized that subconsciously what they were doing was they are basically practicing design thinking. So what they did was, basically they tried to be in the user's shoe. I mean, to talk more elaborately, when these people, the pirates, when they used to go out at those property locations, they used to also behave like their customers. They used to live the customer life and then identify the problems wherever the problem they were facing, while taking the whole renting experience. So while they were all doing that, they were empathizing as a user. They were trying to define what's the problem around. They were trying to ideate, prototype, and test. So it a simple change, like one of their probably designer came up with this idea that this whole star rating is a lot more to do with real estate kind of an rating services. But how do how about we change it to a heart icon? And that kind of increased their engagement by 30%, which is a huge number of engagement on a website. So from a star rating to a wish list kind of an shift was again a very much kind of a design shift. And this is just one example. I mean, there are lot many examples of Airbnb service improvisation, which they took a approach which could be called as the design thinking approach. So, I mean, we all know about this whole new change in identity, and that's what the whole kind of basis of what Airbnb brand has become, which is about people, places, about the whole emotional connect, and then that's about Airbnb. So if you'll like kind of try to understand this story about Airbnb, is that culturally what they did was they were trying to empathize by being in the user's foot. They were defining users' problems by wandering around, sharing their stories, and then defining the problems. Ideating ideas by welcoming fresh ideas, because whosoever it was a new joinee, probably with less experience, zero experience, they were allowed to narrate their stories. They were allowed to come up with wacky ideas, and those were welcomed. And then those ideas were basically prototyped and it was almost like an approach, like you fail early and you prototype and you test and you prototype and you test and you keep on improvising. So back in 2009 to what it is 2021, Airbnb experience, I mean, if most of you have traveled by Airbnb, it's amazing. I mean, you go to any place, it's rented out by some other person, but you still get that whole youthful and more courteous kind of an experience of Airbnb. So that's the story. Now that's again a very startup story who kind of opened up their hearts and thought, opened up their minds and thought about doing something extraordinary, and they got the success. Now let's take another example. So I'm going to share a YouTube video over here. It's about another startup back in US, which is called as Pillpack. Let's understand what this startup does. I will stop sharing and I'll switch to a YouTube link. Let's go to full screen.
New kind of pharmacy. We package your medication and deliver it directly to your door. All you have to do is tear and take your next dose. Managing your medication has never been easier. Here's how it works. Each month, we'll sort your meds, including any vitamins and OTCs, into easy-to-open packets. Need other items like inhalers, creams, or testing supplies? We can send those too. We'll work directly with your doctors and insurance to resolve any issues. We'll adjust your medication if your prescriptions change, and we'll automatically handle all of your refills so you never have to worry. If you have questions or need to make an update, our pharmacists are available 24/7. Getting started is easy. You'll need your insurance information and a list of current medications. From there, we'll handle the rest. We'll verify your account and transfer your prescriptions to our pharmacy. You'll receive your first package in just a few weeks. Now, you'll never sort your pills, never stand in line at a pharmacy, and never miss your medication again. It's your medication made easy.
Okay, now I'm going to start sharing my screen, going to the presentation mode. Okay. So that's Pillpack. Now, again, another very interesting story. So Pillpack founder was, his name is TJ Parker. So he was studying at MIT Medicine Science. And MIT had this department of medical science and even the arts faculty together. So TJ Parker seems to just visit the art kind of section of the institute of the university. And he found that they were doing something very interesting. So he found, artists were taking inspirations around, they were observing people, and then they were doing lot of creative stuff. So somehow Parker felt that, though he's from a very serious pharmacist kind of a background, but how about, he also doing something more creative? So when he started this particular startup, he realized, okay, there's a huge gap in the pharmacy industry in terms of, how people kind of have this whole issue about forgetting their medicines. I mean, forget the senior people, even youngsters, even people in their 30s and 40s have such a huge kind of schedule in their life that they forget to take their medicines, probably which are in nature of chronic diseases. So like typically for a blood pressure person or for a diabetic person, it's a must to have pill on a daily basis, and that too at a very strict time. But people are not able to follow it because, even if you set reminders on your phone or on your probably, I don't know, smartwatch or something, but still you forget it. So how about, creating a solution around making people remember the time of their medicines basis on the prescription, which obviously been provided to them. And it's kind of travel friendly. It reminds you through some kind of mobile application or a desktop application and so on. So that's how this whole story came out, wherein you get delivered this particular box, and there's a strip of these medicines which has the time and the day on which basically your medicines are prescribed. And if you need to travel, like if you're traveling for work and you need to take your pill at 12 in the noon, you just kind of tear that pack and carry it in your purse, and you would get a reminder on their mobile application that 12 noon you have to take this medicine, and you could just have it without any mess, without really hunting into your purse, without really worried about remembering it. So wonderful kind of a startup. Currently, it's been acquired by Amazon for almost like $1 billion deal. But what they did interesting was with a company called as Ideo. So Ideo is a huge design organization based out in multiple countries, and they very consciously practice design thinking. So though Parker had his own startup idea of all this whole, pill packet into a strip format, but there was also a lot of challenge in addressing the whole perception about the brand, and that is where Ideo came into picture. So Ideo helped Parker in kind of streamlining the brand, streamlining the experience, also kind of what the design intervention they did was the login screen to this pill pack was taking 10 steps, like 10 clicks, which they cut down to just 2 clicks. So there was a lot of good user-centered design which was utilized, which helped the whole experience to be very seamless, very simple, yet innovative and highly admirable by all sort of people. I mean, though this whole startup was started basis thinking on senior citizens or people with issues of having memory issues or something, but it's so appealing to even younger audience because of the whole clean identity, because of the whole minimalistic design that it has. So there are like interesting takeaways of this story, and that's like whole good articulated not only product but also the whole service, the whole journey that you experience, wherein user is at the center. Then there's a very simple innovation which is easier, but yet it appeals to a lot of different kind of audience. So it's basically addressing the whole behavioral pain points of the users. Then and generally people appreciate it, and because it's the whole simplicity and the whole good experience that you get, because that's the whole approach taken was of a holistic approach. And again, if you could read about this particular startup, this whole holistic approach is about design thinking. So design thinking is not about you just kind of understand the problem and you attack it. No, you understand the problem holistically. You understand the influences, the factors around that problem, and then you try to address it in a holistic manner. So that's where the whole success begins. Now we'll take a little pause over here and we'll just reflect upon, okay, there's Airbnb, a startup. Pillpack, okay, a little serious kind of an offering a service, but again, a startup. How about, someone like at a very scalable level could utilize design thinking and yet get really good results? And that is where the next story that I'm going to talk about is about IBM. Now, IBM, we all know, is the senior most design company. I mean, that's how technologically, they are known as. They're known as the father of technology at some extent. I mean, IBM comes even before Apple. And we all know about the whole famous Apple ad in 1984. So then, yes, IBM, with its whole huge organization with multinational catering to different kind of enterprise clients and customers, they also thought of adapting to design thinking. But there was a huge challenge that they were not getting the result at a speed and at a scale. So here, the scale is at the level. So if we compare to something like Pillpack, so Pillpack is kind of available in US, but Pillpack is still not in other countries globally, right? So because that there's a whole lot of infrastructure and vendor management and whole the supply system issue which Pillpack will have to deal with. But IBM is a huge giant, right? IBM services products are used globally in, I don't know, 50 odd countries, 50 odd cultures, religions, and ethnicities, and their end-to-end customers would be from really diverse backgrounds. So if IBM has to work along with design thinking, how can they have something which can be at speed so that there are less losses, there's less money wastage involved, and at a scale, so that if they implement it somewhere in a country, it can get implemented in another 20 countries. So that's the speed and scale that we are talking about. So now let's understand what was IBM's story. Now there's a very interesting quote again by Ideo. So David Kelly and Tim Brown happened to meet IBM folks. And what they really confessed was, okay, we really blew it by calling it out as design thinking, but it doesn't really work great when it comes to to the scalability factor. It fails over there. And that is when there are two folks. One is Adam Cutler and Phil Gilbert. Now, these are the two people who basically are the design thinking program managers at IBM. They collaborated with Ideo, which is with David Kelly and Tim Brown. So on one fine day, they all were sitting together and they were just discussing these challenges. This confession was made by David. So then Adam basically initiated a kind of a series of workshops at IBM to just understand, along with their stakeholders, that how this whole design thinking can be streamlined and catered in such a way that it becomes relevant to their business. That is one. And second, it becomes scalable, and it becomes and it's available at a speed kind of in delivery. So they worked out a lot of kind of an mechanisms. They ideated a lot, and they came up with something like IBM 1.0, design thinking 1.0, and then the latest one, what I know, is enterprise design thinking. So if you ever kind of visit IBM's website, there is also a link to IBM's enterprise design thinking. It's a wonderful free course that anyone can avail. It's online. You just need to kind of read through the material, do some checklist test, and you get the certification of an enterprise design thinking person. I tried that. And it's really wonderful because it so simplistically explained the whole process. Now, what do you see? This is a kind of a glimpse of what is enterprise design thinking. You will see this, shapes which are recognizable, and you relate to their process, to the principles of what the design thinking means to them. So for example, this loop is the whole prototype and testing part, what we discussed in our earlier use cases, right? Wherein you observe, you reflect, and you make. And then you again go back to observe, you reflect, and make, which is basically you prototype and you test, you prototype and you test. And you keep on doing that until the person who is creating it, until the design thinker himself feels that they have never seen this kind of an experience before. So that's the whole loop which IBM functions it when they are working on various types of products and solutions for their clients. And then there are other principles which guide them, which is about the whole user focus and the focus on the user's outcome. So typically in IBM, there's a kind of an composite character what they have created. Her name is Sarah. So any kind of solution or any kind of an process implementation they come up with, they have to see that Sarah is overwhelmed with it. So Sarah is not like a person. So Sarah is like a character being created, and there is a attitude, approach, behavior to Sarah. And whatever solution they come up with, they will first reflect upon, okay, does Sarah would like this kind of a solution? So then they will look for people around who are like Sarah's, and then they will test with them, and then they will again improvise. So they'll go on to the whole loop mode. Then diverse empowered teams. Now IBM has products and solutions almost from a typical retailer kind of a product to aviation, and probably even some products they're catering to NASA and so on. So they have different types of skills and expertise. So they are the people, who want every one of them, all of their stakeholders, all of their employees to learn about design thinking. So IBM currently has this continuous design thinking education program in their organization, which basically means millions of their software engineers and software leaders are completely educated about design thinking. So wherever in the world, if they are practicing or they're working on any challenge, any business challenge or software challenge or technology challenge, they are practicing in the mindset of design thinking and then arriving at a solution. So that's about it, and we'll talk about these keys as well. So there is a very famous research company called as Forrester, and Forrester did a humongous research along with IBM to just understand by this whole design thinking what they did at IBM, did it really worked for them? So it does. I mean, there was almost like a 300% ROI, which was calculated for IBM. And there was almost like, 75% more efficiency, which was kind of achieved by the whole organization by cutting down on the time and by whole alignment of the different types of processes and so on. So it really worked. I mean, it worked to an extent of humongous amount of profitability. So there's also a whole key to this enterprise design thinking, and there's something like called as playback. So in IBM's design thinking language, playback is basically, you frequently have critic sessions. You frequently kind of go into take your prototype or take your solution in front of audience who can critique them, and then and there's no hierarchy into it. I mean, when IBM was working on this whole enterprise design thinking program, they had actually hired two design interns who had no idea about what IBM is or what their technology is or what their softwares are, and they just got into that whole program and they were only acting as designers. So that just got in like a whole fresh perspective, and they were like kind of respected like any other IBM employee. So breaking down the hierarchy, breaking down the general direction and focus, but without saying how do exactly what they have to do it. So you just take that whole journey and then you try to kind of get into that whole experiential mode and then ideate about solutions. That's about it. And then sponsor users are potential or actual users from their clients who basically get into her signed up programs that, okay, you will co-design with IBM team, and then until the time where the project gets released. So all of these activities, if you'll see, can be relatable to what we saw in Airbnb case, right? There was welcoming of fresh ideas, and there's whole empathy being practiced, and also to kind of pay Pillpack kind of in case where there's a lot of user centricity being done and a lot of user experience and the whole holistic approach of looking at problems. So that's where I kind of come to kind of understanding of this whole design thinking process. So what is it about? If we have to just quickly learn, I mean, I'm not really going to go a lot of detail into it because there's humongous amount of content available online about design thinking, wherein you could read about it, you could do some kind of immersive exercise, you could try out some kind of projects for yourself. So instead, what I want to really do with these stories is like inspire you guys and just kind of push you guys a little bit that go on the internet and see what is design thinking, because in whatever field you are, be it a student in engineering, student in medical, or probably practicing some yoga or something, just see what design thinking is and try to see if it can help you in solving what your problems are. So what is this process? As we go back to Airbnb example or Pillpack example or IBM example, you first of all empathize. You fully understand the experience of the user for whom you're going to design, and do this through observation, through interacting with the user, immersing into their whole experience or to their environment. Then you come back and you define in terms of understanding what this whole experience of this user is, there are shortfalls, where there are pain points, and you understand the whole user point of view, and you start defining what these problem areas are. Then you ideate thoroughly in terms of what could be the possible solutions, and you just try to go by the art of possibilities, just open your mind and give away a lot of ideas. And then probably you could have a certain kind of filtering mechanisms based on your feasibility and viability issues. And then you go for a few prototypes. So you start prototyping it. It could be almost like a cardboard model, or you just put up some mock-ups around your services and so on, and you prototype it. When you prototype it, you get an opportunity to fail early. So you test it, right? When you have a prototype, you can test it quickly. So you test and then you learn, then you again prototype. You test, you learn, you again prototype. So you have to go in a bit of loop in the prototype and testing phase, but you could also be going into a loop to coming back to the empathy phase. Again, to empathize, okay, is this really working for the user? Is it really addressing to the pain points that we had defined, or do we need to really define further pain points and so on? And you ideate and you just kind of get into this whole process of a lot more designers' way of looking at problem statement. Now, I mean, of course, I have not really been prepared to for this thought, but it's just take a flashback and go to your childhood days when you were a child, and probably at a coastal area, and you were just looking at the sand, and that sand kind of gave you an opportunity to do something. And you used to create those igloos over there, or probably fort with your father, mother, and your parents, and having some nice experience. But when you were doing that, you were not really into the whole mindset, okay, whether it's going to work, not work, because you know that the whole wave thing will come and it will just take away the sand. So you would still prototype, you will still test it, it will still take that whole fun of creating it, destroying it, again creating it. So that's in a way very close to being into whole design thinking zone. You be a little child over there, because you're open for ideas, you're open for failing, you're open for testing, you're open for trying a lot many things. So that's basically on the note I would come to a conclusion or the end of the slide, where I would like to take questions if there are any, and I can stop sharing. Okay, over to you, Siddhi.
Hi, thank you so much, Kranti. Anyone who has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, in the comments, and Kranti would be happy to help you. Till then, I wanted to know that, what is the importance of design thinking for graphic designers?
Okay. How should I put it? Like, you could be in any profession. You could be a graphic designer, you could be even artist, you could be an engineer, doctor, anyone. Okay, it will be still useful for you. Okay. Now, there's always a contradiction between an artist and a designer, right?
Yes.
Because artists are the one who would express in terms of their art, but a designer would design something which has a sellable value. Like, they will think about the end user, and then they will basically design for it. But even for the artist, if he has to look for a service in his, his design, his art to put in an exhibition, he has to still take a design thinking approach to just map out how the experience of that museum would be, or that exhibition would be, so that his art would get sold in a nice format. So he's still practicing design thinking, right? For graphic designers per se, I would not like tag it like, it would be just useful for graphic designers. It could be useful for anyone, right? So graphic designers, in your career, when you will be doing a lot of branding exercises, logo design, and a lot of brand building kind of exercises, that is when design thinking is going to play a lot of important role, because that is where you will try to empathize with your user and understand, okay, what is that perception they have about the brand, and then try to translate that brand into the whole logo identity.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I really liked your thinking there, and how you said that design thinking is useful for everyone. And when I
Mhm.
think about it, I think we're using it somewhere in our life, not being
Yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah, maybe, yes. I mean, as I mentioned, like, as a child, we were doing so many things, right? We were trying and we were prototyping, and we were not really caring whether it will work or not. We were happy to fail, right?
Right.
So children are very good design thinkers. So yeah, it's like we have already done design thinking probably in our childhood, maybe in our senior KG or lower KG.
Right.
Yeah.
We have the first question from Nandini. She says, "Ma'am, firstly, I would take the enterprise design thinking from
Mhm.
IBM. Moving on, how to learn more about design thinking and the process and the ways to design useful creatives."
Interesting. So, okay, I mean, wonderful that you're going to take up that whole course, online course of enterprise design thinking. What you could do is try to look around the problems in your surroundings. For example, just look at the wastage being created in your kitchen. Okay, or probably the hygiene issues of your apartment, or the hygiene issues of your road, or I don't know, it could be even managing a wardrobe. There's always some lot of organizational management that you have to always face, and then see, can you utilize design thinking over here. So first empathize with the user, who is the user of that probably kitchen waste, or probably that roadside waste, and then talk to those people, understand what are the challenges, pain points, probably feelings, motivations they are going through, then define those problems, then ideate with your peers, with your friends. Okay, what could be, some wacky ideas to address them? And once you get those ideas, probably prototype them and test them. Is it working for them or not? And then again observe, again get into that empathy mode. And when you see certain challenges, go back to your drawing board, address it, improvise your prototype, and go back again. So practice is something, is what going to make you better in design thinking. And there is never a kind of in saturation period in this field, to be honest. I mean, uh, consciously, subconsciously, I practiced design thinking when I was design researcher, when I was working in UX design and so on. But I've still taken a Stanford course right now because I just want to revisit, relearn, probably take away the whole baggage of those experience and again get into the whole fresh perspective. And I'm doing that. So, and probably 10 years down the line, I might be taking again that course. I don't know. But yes, it's like a continuous learning process.
And she has asked, like day-to-day issues would also work, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, try that. It will. And then let me know.
Ashish has the next question. How can it be applied to building sustainable model for small business?
Mhm.
It's a big question. How to go into optimizing the process that does not look like a lot, but yet at the same time provides reasonable results.
Okay. So let me take it. I mean, I'll break down his
Yes.
question. First
Yes.
is about the whole sustainability part for a small startup, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, Now, here, sustainability, I'm considering from the sustenance of your organization. If you're having a startup, how it can sustain over a period of time. So, look at the whole culture of your startup. Look at the whole business model of your startup, and then see, where all you can apply design thinking processes, design thinking approach, and methodology to improvise that. Get into the whole cultural shift mode. If you are not into right now, get into that cultural shift mode. Make each person in your organization a design thinking evangelist, and then continuously keep on doing that. That is one way. That is where your sustenance will come up. The second thing, I think, the second part of the question was how to get that whole optimum level of benefits, right? um,
Yes.
yeah. So, optimum level of benefits would only come when you are constantly onto the path of improvisation, right? There is no end to it. Like, never be like, satisfied. Okay, now my process is the best in the world. No, it's still not. There would be always a competitor who would be probably having thinking 10 yards beyond you. So get into the always that mindset to challenge yourself or challenge your processes. You have come to say you create a process, you probably implement it for a few months, and then start observing it. Start empathizing with your users. Are they really benefiting it? What are those challenges? Go back to your drawing board, ideate on solutions, implement them. Again, observe. So that whole loop mode, what we saw in IBM's approach, that is the loop mode that you have to keep on ticking. Because in a highly startup competitive environment, you have to always keep on thinking beyond what your competitor is thinking, and that's how you will be always relevant to your users and to your clients.
Thank you, Kranti. Anyone else has questions, please do let us know. Till then, I wanted to know one thing actually. A lot of times we know how important the power of empathizing is, but with that we also get to hear that I'm not able to empathize enough. I'm not able to understand the users.
Mhm.
So, do you think what are some things that such people should do? How?
Sure. Um, Empathy is a vast topic, to be honest. But at the same time, empathy is a very biological phenomenon. I mean, it's kind of present in our brains. It's like somewhere below the amygdala, I guess, somewhere in the whole brain composition, there's a small packet which helps every kind of a human being to empathize with each other. So empathy is present with all of us. It's just that we are probably doing it, not doing it. We are just not very conscious about it, right? The best practice of being an empathetic person is to be a very good listener. which basically means when someone is talking to you, and it could be for any kind of in context, it could be like a friend conversation also. But when you are like into a conversation, first listen. Don't get into the whole react mode, get into a reflective mode. When you are a good listener, you are almost like two step up in the whole empathy practice kind of thing. And then there are many other ways, like you observe people a lot. You get into the whole I mean, the most extreme format is like you almost live the life of your user. And people do that. I'm telling you, designers do that. Designers would spend a day with their users, observing them. How does their day start? What do do their at their breakfast time? What do they do in the noon time? What do they do at their lunch and the evening tea time? How do they go to their bed? Designers observe that. Designers almost get into the mode of living the user's life. That's the extreme kind of empathy you could practice. But the foremost one is being a very good listener and being a very good observer. And I think ask a lot of questions. That's the third one. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that really helped. Anyone else? We'll wait for 2 minutes more. Anyone else have any other questions at all? We'll definitely love to take them up.
Mhm. No questions, I guess.
Yes, probably. I think
Nice.
anyone else having any questions can reach out to Kranti through her LinkedIn. We've linked it in our description below, and so
Yeah.
I think that can work.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, on as I end, I want to know what is that one advice you would like to give to everyone to become good design thinkers. If I should.
Right. Interesting question to a concluding note. That would be to go back to your childhood days, to be the child in that whole. I mean, whatever position and age group or profession that you are into, but just try to get into that whole childish mode. To try to fail, and it's okay to fail. To keep trying, to keep failing, and then keep improvising. So that's how you could be a better design thinking person.
That's an interesting one. Well, thank you so much, Kranti, for joining us today, and thank you
Same,
so
yeah.
much to all the audience who's been so patiently listening to us and being with us. Thank you for taking up your questions. I hope, I know that Kranti did a very well job at clearing them. I think with this, I would like to end the Design at Talk 7 and see you until next time. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.